Welcome to the Peace Building Podcast. Join host Susan Coleman as she interviews today's most creative, courageous, and sometimes outrageous mediators, coaches, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers whose work, whether intended or not, is building peace. Tune in for 45 minutes of pure inspiration as we explore the best stories, the best practices, the best ideas of a new world emerging. Here's your host, global consultant, coach, facilitator, and mediator, Susan Coleman.
So, Gabrielle, hello, hi, it's Susan. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Susan. Nice talking to you. How are you?
You too. I'm great, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. I have here with me Gabrielle Kluck, who is someone I have known now she's a client and friend and colleague, and I've known you now for how long, Gabrielle, since we first met each other? Maybe 4 or 5 years ago? Something.
6, Susan.
6
years. Yeah. Because we met when I got appointed as a regional ombudsman with the United Nations, and we met in New York when I was there.
That's right.
To meet my other newly appointed colleagues as well. We met.
That's right.
Briefly,
so where am
I?
I see these beautiful African masks behind you. Mm-hmm. Where am I finding you today? Or tonight. It's really, I know it's today for me. It's tonight for you. So
that's right.
Are you at home or are you at the office?
I'm at home at this point, Sunday evening here, and it's just gotten dark. And it's 7:30 almost in the evening, and you find me in Uganda. And you find me very close to the equator in Entebbe.
In Entebbe, Uganda. Yeah. Right. And I think it's the rainy season. Is it right now?
No, it's actually the dry season, but we had a huge thunderstorm and rainstorm this day, which is unusual. So climate change is also affecting Uganda.
Is it? Yeah. So things
definitely
are happening that are not within the norm.
Yeah, if you listen to the locals, definitely. But even for me, I've been here now 4 years. This is unusual. Yeah.
This
time of year, in the rainy season, sure, almost every day, but not now. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember the camps. That's Sudan, but the mud issue is really intense, just the amount of mud that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. So, folks, I have with me Gabrielle Kluck, as I said. She's in transition at the moment. She has been the regional ombudsman and mediator for the Sudan region of the United Nations Secretariat, and she's been based. First, she was based in Khartoum, and then she has been based in Entebbe, Uganda, and now she's on her way to Rome. Poor her. To become the ombudsman for the World Food Program in Rome. And she has, Gabrielle, during the time that the chapter that I have known her, which is while she's regional ombudsman in the Sudan region, maybe this is the whole time that you have been working as a regional ombudsman, whether it was Khartoum or Sudan. You have worked with about 10,000 employees, deployed in over 100 duty stations of the various UN peacekeeping missions in Darfur, South Sudan, Abyei. Is that how you pronounce Abyei?
Abyei. Yes, that's right.
Abyei, Burundi, and Uganda. She has a Master's of Science degree in Business Administration with an emphasis on organizational change and transformation. Basically, she describes her self-described mission is to help people create more harmonious work environments and thus more impactful organizations. And then I have to add, because, Gabrielle is a seriously interesting, intrepid person. She started off as a ballerina, I believe. Is that a fair or?
Nah, not professionally at all. But I was really smitten of ballet, and it was the biggest thing in my life. And and yes, I wanted to become a professional dancer. That didn't happen. I became a semi-professional flamenco dancer, though. And but I've always loved dance. Yeah.
Was that in the Netherlands?
In the Netherlands.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, which is where you're from.
That's where I'm from. Yeah.
That's where you're from. And but she says she appreciates exploring boundaries both at work and privately, and has been a ballet, a flamenco dancer, a skydiver, a backpacker, a mountain climber, a motorcyclist, a yogini, a deep sea diver, an off-piste skier, and also is a pilot, but you're taking flying lessons these days.
Mm-hmm, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure
so
how
I
you're going
hope to very soon get my private pilot license. Yeah, and then to be able to go for, a trip in the air. Yes.
Are you going to be able to continue doing that in Rome?
Yeah, definitely. I've already checked out. There is an airfield north of the old city, so in Rome itself. And there is a flying school there. So, yeah, I have already emailed them and definitely will continue. Yeah.
May not be quite as much fun as flying in Uganda, but...
Well, I'm not too worried. Italy is a beautiful country, too, with the mountains and the sea. And if, and if you can fly around Rome, it's beautiful. Now I learned flying here at Lake Victoria, where Entebbe is located, and it has beautiful inlets and islands and peninsulas, and so I flew over those to learn the flying. And so that was been African bush flying, as they call it. And so now I will go from my Muran runway to the tarmac runway, so it gets a bit of more civilization, if you like to. Yeah, and
I like your worldview. In our pre-interview, I was bemoaning. I have a 20-year-old son, as you know, who is pretty intrepid himself, and he's now about to go climb Denali, which is 20,000 feet. It's the largest. I think it's the largest. I believe it's the largest peak in North America for sure. I don't think it's in the Western Hemisphere. I think maybe forget which one is the largest in South America. But you said, I'm like feeling scared for my son, and you said, listen, Susan, like in all the jumping out of planes, motorcycle riding, going into Darfur, going into South Sudan, blah 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 blah. The time that I hurt myself is when I walked out of my office and I tripped in a pothole.
Yeah, absolutely true. Or walk around the garden and tripped in a pothole. Absolutely. That's when I had my foot in braces and was on crutches. But so you can worry what you like, but I think people want to do what they want to do, need to do what they need to do, and that's for everyone different. But don't worry, because for me, my only accidents happened walking, and not during any of the other activities that I've ever done.
Right. So now when you go into the World Food Program, it also sounds like you're going to be, you've been going into really some pretty deadly conflict zones for the last 13 years, I believe. You've been in
longer, because before that, since 1999, I started working for the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which America is also a member state and contributing member state. I worked in Vienna, in Austria, but regularly visited Kosovo. So, I was
at the time
in Kosovo 2 weeks after the Gurkhas. A lot of people can remember that the Gurkhas going through the tunnel and get going into Pristina, into Kosovo. Yeah. Yes, I've been regularly there as well. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, I don't know if you have seen on PBS, there's a pretty wonderful, public, do you know what I mean by PBS? Public Broadcasting Service in the United States. There's been a wonderful, it's 2011, but there's a pretty wonderful series called Women, War, and Peace that if you actually haven't seen it, might be interesting for you to see, because it'll probably be we're mindful of many of the places that you have been and traveled to in your work.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see that. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So is there anything else in terms of your background that you'd like to share with the listeners, or is that you think I'm going to put your bio up on the website for sure.
What I'd like to add is that, I studied business school and it was a lot about organizational change, but it's very much from the organizational perspective, from how you move the organization and how you redesign it and how you also look at the processes inside and how you deal with empowering people and this and that. But it didn't cover the viewpoint or experience from the individuals working there. And so for me, that was the missing link. And actually, my graduation paper was called The Pearl Within the Shell, and the shell being the organization and Shell actually being Shell, the oil organization, because that's what I did my graduation paper, I wrote there, my internship, and work later on there as well. And the pearl is the person. And so, we need to see the people in organizations as the pearls, and the organization should be built to support these people to perform their duties and perform, their tasks that are aligned with the mandate in order for the organization to fulfill, what it is supposed to do here. And so that whole interaction between the organization and the individual also prompted me to then study psychology, which I have done for 3 years at a very intensive private institute in the Netherlands. And that I just wanted to add, because I think that's important for people to understand if we continue this interview, how I sit in my work, how I see my work, how, what my view is. It's really the interplay between the human and the organizational dynamics, specifically in times of change, and we are forever in times of change. And that just fascinates me, and I feel that there is where I have a contribution to make.
Yeah. That you really need to. You can't avoid looking at the individual level of system, if you will, and really, really making sure that you're creating the best opportunity for people to bring their best selves to work or to whatever the endeavor that they're doing. So, and also preliminarily, I've visited you, I've stayed with you in Uganda, and then we went, and then we've done work together at UNMISS, which is the UN mission in South Sudan. It's in UNMISS with two S's, not. Yeah. And you can sit maybe tell UNMISS, yeah. But I don't know any other do you consider yourself? This is obviously the Peace Building podcast, and I don't know if you relate to being a peace builder. Is that a term that resonates with you?
Yeah, definitely. I like that very much because, as you said, my vision is to help people create a harmonious workplace. I mean, harmonious is also peaceful, right? Peace building. That's about making things harmonious and in tune with each other, and out of conflict. So definitely, it doesn't resonate with me.
Can you say anything so you're an ombudswoman? I don't know.
Ombudsman, ombudswoman,
whatever.
Ombudsperson. Everything goes. Yeah.
What's the connection in your mind between building peace and being an ombudsperson? What is ombuds? Maybe you should say a little bit about what that is, because some people may not really know exactly what that is.
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. So very briefly said, the core of the work of an organizational ombudsman, which I am, I'm an organizational ombudsman, is that anyone any staff member of the organization can come to me with a work-related concern. So it's the staff members, not the clients, or the stakeholders of the organization. It's the staff members and work-related concerns. So I don't do personal concerns. I'm not a staff counselor where you also can go to with your substance abuse or your sleeplessness or depressions or whatever, but for me it's work-related concerns, and work-related is also very broad, and that ranges from people who have questions about their entitlements up to people who have problems with their boss or feel bullied, harassed in the workplace, or have witnessed or even committed fraud or engaged in behavior that is not allowed in the organization, prohibited behavior, or who are in huge group conflicts. That's possible as well. And so any of that, they can come to me. And what we always say, it's a very safe first step to go to the ombudsman, because I work confidential. This is a very important quality of or principle of our work as ombudsman in organizations. So even the fact that people talk with us doesn't go anywhere. it does mean also that we don't make any records. And what we do with the issues that people bring to us is to work with them in finding the best solutions. I mean, first understanding, of course, the issue at hand better, because the person who brings it can have a certain perspective on it, and I can bring in other perspectives through questioning, and and also link it to the organizational dynamics, and then we see what are your options to resolve this? Because we're always looking at resolution of the issue. And that is something that the person who comes to me, the staff member who comes to me, can maybe totally do him or herself, or it might also require an intervention on my part, or I might also refer people to other offices or instances, or I might do some skill training with them. And what a very important part is of our work as well, and that's why I stress the organizational interest I have, an organizational change background, is to look at the systemic issues. So through the stories that people bring us about, their experiences with issues and problems and conflict in the organization, to look at how does the organization let these conflicts happen or these problems happen, and what is the organization able to do about resolving them, or able about supporting people to resolve them, and what got stuck, or what is dysfunctional, or what is actually up to change. And then I look as an ombudsman, how can I get that message across to the decision makers, to the management, so that interventions that they should make to improve things actually also happen. So it's really from the individual, issue going all the way up to, the organizational change. So it's a very broad spectrum, and I really enjoy that very much.
Yeah, you're looking for systemic patterns, essentially, and then building awareness at senior levels about what the systemic patterns are, so that they can make changes. Because you're seeing people at the individual or group level or departmental level, but then there, you look to see what's happening over and over and over again that we actually could do something about as an organization. Exactly.
Now, it's a young-ish profession. It started basically in the Americas, and
Didn't it start in Sweden?
But the ombudsman, of course, exists as a governmental ombudsman as well, and the governmental ombudsman have also a mandate to investigate issues, and they also can give a binding, I would almost say verdict. That's of course not the right word, but they can give a binding decision, or and say, well, this is how it's going to be solved, and this is going to change, and that is of course different from what an organizational ombudsman does. So in the organization, we're part of the system of justice, and you have an internal system of justice where people can, file a grievance, a complaint, go to the internal tribunals, and the ombudsman works parallel to that. So the moment the grievance starts to exist, we like to come already then in play, to de-escalate the issue, to also do early intervention, because that's always the most effective. Obviously, if you let it fester, it can grow cancerous, and then it's very hard to deal with it. As you and I have seen when we did a whole group mediation, when a department had a huge issue and it was going on for a very long time, and and it was very hard then to resolve all that. And so every step in the formal process, we could be there as ombudsman or as mediators between parties if it goes to the internal tribunals to help solve, to come to resolution. And so it's a newest profession. But I think what's interesting to know also is that I really got into this because I had been working as a change consultant, but also as an HR manager, then as a general manager, if you like, as well. And as a general manager, and I often got problems of people brought to me, and I knew there was a better way to solve them, but it's not, there's no.
Then what? What was it? What was sort of the status? What was sort of happening
Well, for example, when I worked for the United Nations agency that works with the Palestine refugees in the Middle East, and I worked in Damascus in Syria, I got a conflict. It came to me when I was head of general services, it's called administrative, department that does HR and IT and general services and training and this and that. So they came to me because they had a whole community problem among the teachers, among, the people working in the school, the health clinic, in a certain real refugee camp. And so I went out there and I did a mediation, if you like, with the community. And for me, this was so interesting. It gave me so much fulfillment. And at the same time, also, people come to me and they've been bullied at work, or they've been mistreated, or, they haven't been given their due entitlements or whatever. And so you really want to help them resolve that. And then I thought, this must not be an afterthought for a manager. We need to have this better. And then I heard about organizational ombudsman, because Kofi Annan asked that his UN internal system of justice.
He was the Secretary General at the time.
Yeah, at the time got evaluated, and then the biggest recommendation out of that evaluation in 2006 was you need to redesign your internal system of justice. The tribunals, it's very dysfunctional, but also you have an ombudsman, and that office needs to decentralize. You need to have regional ombudsman, and this is what they all, should be doing and where they should be going. And I really wanted to become one of them.
And the regional ombudsman,
and I did. I managed.
Yeah. And the regional ombudsman group that just got started in the UN Secretariat in 2000. What? When did that whole structure start? It wasn't.
Really in 2010, early 20, because we got together. End of 2009, and then 2010, everyone got deployed in 7 regional offices for the United Nations, and that's how it worked. So
can you tell the story? Things that I would like to talk to you about, but you can also tell me what you would, I'd love to have you just tell the listeners a little bit about, first being in Khartoum and then going to Entebbe and how you changed offices, and then maybe get into. I'm not sure. I always ask. I know you have asked you to come up with one thing that you might want to talk about, and that might be your whole role as an ombuds, or maybe there's something else. But can I first ask you about just the Khartoum to Entebbe, and just paint a picture of a little bit about what your life has been like between these two places?
Yeah, for sure. So it was decided that one of the regional offices should be in Khartoum. Sudan at that time in 2009 and 10 had, was still one country. It was before the secession of South Sudan, which only happened in 2011. And so it's a huge country. I think at the moment it was the biggest in Africa.
A huge swamp, right? Doesn't Sudan mean swamp, right?
The Sud, the Sud.
But
that, of course, is in the south. So South Sudan is... That has the jungles and the mud, which you talked about, and that's where we've been together. But what is now the Sudan, or at the time was more called, informally North Sudan, and where Darfur is, that's for a huge part a very dry country, and more a desert-like place, although it has its rainfalls as well. But so I came to Khartoum at the time, set up my office there within the mission in Sudan. So that was UNMISS, contrary to UNMISS's.
1S.
Yeah. And so I worked from there covering the mission in Darfur, but as well as the mission in Sudan, which was both in Darfur as well as in South Sudan, and actually more in South Sudan at the moment, or at that time. And what happens in peacekeeping, it's very dynamic peacekeeping. And every half year, the mandate is being reviewed. And every year it is being extended or not. And then the mandate can also be really changed. And so after the succession in 2011, the Sudan wanted to not anymore have the mission in Sudan existing. And so it closed, and its mandate had also finished. With that, the staff and the mission left, and there was only a small liquidation team behind to take care of the assets of the UN. They really call it a liquidation team. And so I was as an ombudsman office, being part of the Secretary General office in New York for my independence. I'm not part of any of the entities I ombuds for. I'm independent, which also makes it a safe place for staff to go to me, because I'm not part of their mission structure, not part of the organizational structure, not part of any line, that they are part of, but not me. So there's no strings attached for me working with their mission. And so we were like, where are we going next? And so I did an assessment of where my missions are located and what's the best way to reach them all. And that turned out to be Entebbe. So, and then we went to Entebbe, and how we did that, at the time the United Nations had flights from Khartoum to Al-Fashir, which is the capital of Darfur, and from Al-Fashir to Entebbe. And so we thought that would be the best way, and we needed to get our office stuff as well, and files, and our own personal belongings down to Entebbe. And what the Sudan had decided at the time was that anyone who works for UNMISS is not welcome in Darfur, because, that's UNAMID. And, trying to explain to them that you work for both. UNAMID is the mission in Darfur, United Nations, the mission in Darfur. The United Nations assistance mission in Darfur. And so try to explain to the Sudan government that you work actually for both missions, and both for UNAMID and UNMISS. So that they didn't agree to. That something like that was. They didn't go for it. So I remembered that my staff member, Ethiopian staff member, arrived in Darfur. The national Salome, and the national police was waiting at the stairs to check people's IDs and identification tags, and so they sent her back. They kept her in an office for several hours, and then she had to stay on the airport until the next day to the UN flight would return to Khartoum. And so we had to find a way around that, which we managed to do finally. But I remember that she then had to drive from the UN plane with a bus to the other plane would bring her to Entebbe, and she had to duck under the seat for the security not to see her. Because, she's got this huge amount of curly hair, and she would have definitely been recognized and been asked to step out and be returned to Khartoum. So, but we made it, and we came to Entebbe, and then were hosted by the mission actually in the Congo, who manages their support base in Entebbe, and that's why I have been located for the last 4 years. And we will continue to be located there. And it's, peacekeeping is extremely dynamic. So one mission is closed, and then the mission in South Sudan, and UNMISS opens. Abyei opened, the interim security forces in Abyei. That is where the oil issues are, where there is fighting, and also where there is a dispute between North or...
That's where a lot of the ongoing actual armed conflict has been happening, is right about there, no? Or
in Abyei, but it's a small area, but particularly in South Sudan since December 2013. So that's been now for a full 2 years. But then we also have had now Central African Republic starting, Burundi stopping, and then we had an election mission. And now Burundi has had big issues there. So now we will see which new mission will be opened there. We had the mission open in Mali. So it's the Congo also. The headquarters were in Kinshasa. Then in the northeast, close to the Ugandan border, the fighting continued. So most of the headquarters were moved to Goma, which is close to the Ugandan border. So this is the dynamic of peacekeeping continuously, but it remains unfortunately very busy for peacekeeping in Africa. Yeah,
very fluid and a lot of intensity.
Yeah.
So, is there a piece of work or a one thing that I don't know if there is one thing that you wanted to tell the listeners about, or we can continue talking about this in general, but is there a specific piece of work that you think would be an interesting and instructive case that you could share that comes to mind?
Yeah, I could, and because it also will show how I work with the dynamics of organizational, change and interventions, and what the human dynamic, that's what I always keep in mind when individuals come to me. So here, I came to South Sudan, to the mission in South Sudan several years ago. And
mind you, when you're doing that, you're in Entebbe, so you have to fly into. You South go in Sudan for like a couple of weeks at a time. You go into South Sudan to do your work, right?
For minimum 1 week up to 2, and to Darfur from here I go for a minimum of 2 weeks up to 3. Quite often, and so it depends on where you go to and also the issues at hand. But it's not a mission of 2 or 3 days. They're longer. Definitely.
And can you paint, I don't want to interrupt you, but can you paint a picture of when you go into South Sudan or Darfur? Can you paint a picture of like what that looks like going in there? You're flying in on a UN plane.
Yeah, it's a UN plane. So the United Nations have their own planes for reason of being independent and their own mobility and their own schedules and being in control of their, their own movement control, as they call it, literally. And so you fly, for example, from Khartoum to Al-Fashir, and then you can fly onwards, for example, with a helicopter, or with to other places, because in Darfur, a lot of places you can't reach over the road, and if you fly in, there might not be enough of a runway for a fixed wing, as they call it, so you need to go with a helicopter. And in South Sudan, it's the same. Abyei you can only reach with a helicopter. And often the UN works to improve that, and then also leaves improved airfields and runways behind once they, leave for the community and for the government to use. So, it's just normal. You go to the normal airport where there is a UN terminal. In Khartoum, we had a UN terminal at the other side of the airport. So you come there, you have check-in. So you have check-in counters, and you have your luggage get weighed. You get a boarding pass as well. You get your luggage ticket. So it's all quite similar. You have a waiting room. You have a little canteen, and then you wait until your flight gets called. And so you board, and at the other end, your transport is waiting to bring you to the office. And once I actually arrived in Nyala, which is a big place the second biggest place in South Sudan. In the Sudan, in Darfur as well. And Nyala has been for a long time under lots of movement restrictions due to the violence. And the airport is half an hour away from the UN compound. And so we had to go with an armed escort. So I was taken off the plane and put in an armored car with a bodyguard and a driver. And then, I had no idea that this was necessary there. And then we drove with a armed escort in front of 8 Nigerian military, really armed from top to down with flak jackets, helmets, and automatic guns, and even rocket-propelled grenades. The ones that we actually see the terrorists having over their shoulder, they had them too, and a similar car at the back. And they were sitting in open seats so they could jump off any time, and that all to move just one person. And I remember I was sitting there and sort of looking around, feeling a bit embarrassed about this being all necessary, but there were United Nations tanks also on strategic positions. And then at one point I heard, shh. And so we had a flat tire. So
my God.
So then the military will jump out of their, escort vehicles, and they spread out, and, and then one or two change the tire, and I was like, oh, I want to open a window, and then I realized that armored cars don't allow you to open a window, clearly. So, and I've had that when I worked in Kosovo, when I visited Kosovo at the time, I had the same thing. Yeah, I was in armored cars going around Kosovo there as well, and at certain times had a bodyguard. And I remember also once that I had to stay in Pristina when it was really a rough time, and they put me in a safe house. So you're at sort of the outskirts of the city, where there is left and right heaps of smoke going up because of the looting and some inter-fighting. And I was in a safe house with a radio. There was no electricity. There was no water. And, with a package of biscuits and a bottle of water. They left me there and locked the door. And it's like, oh, the next day we pick you up, which they did.
Hard to do your work when you sort of basically are under siege yourself.
Yeah, but for me, it doesn't happen on a daily basis. It's only for me during those visits, and not every place I go. So I have also been often enough, in Darfur, you always, and in South Sudan now also, always the UN works and live in the same compound. So they have their offices on the compound, and they have their little village, a UN village on the compound. They have restaurants, they have a canteen, they have a coffee bar, they have a gym, they have a welfare place. They try to organize activities. And if I come visit, I stay there as well. And
they're often always playing country western music, as far as I can tell. It's like, what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah, and then in South Sudan, when we were there, we stayed in a hotel. But the situation in many of the places in South Sudan now is also such that also as a visitor, you have to stay on the compound. Yeah, so that's changed now too due to the violence. So, and also I've had in Darfur often enough, or that I went to places and it was not, or South Sudan too, or Abyei, that there's not much to eat. So there's like onions and tomato and goat's meat, and it's really nice if you are a vegetarian. So I'm very well tuned into all this, and take my own biscuits and dates and what have you, and nuts and apples, so that if need be I can survive for several days there without having to use the food available. And there's staff who really have to, every time when they come back to the mission from leave, have to bring foodstuffs in, to survive, so it's a really rough places, but it's part of it, and it's very good to be there, because you need to understand, if you want to help these people, you need to understand what they face, what it is like for them. Like when we were in Abyei, and Salome had you live and work in containers, and hers was infested with cockroaches, for example, and she had to deal with that, or had people deal with that, and then we had the shower outside, and then somebody had left light on and the door open, which you should not do in the middle of South Sudan in the jungle, and because there were 1,000 insects inside, but I really wanted the shower. So I mean, you just have to deal with it. And I always think, well, I don't have to do this every day, and I'm here to do my work. I just it's okay. It's okay. It's just part of it. I think what is more of a hazard is that you can have food poisoning, or waterborne diseases, malaria. You can be bitten by a dog, it's rabies, these kind of things I find far more concerning. People got typhoid a lot in these missions. You have unhygienic circumstances, bad food, and that is really what you have to, have to be alert for. You have to really be keeping healthy. The mental strain is huge as well. And so for people who work there all the time, they get rest and recuperation every so many weeks, depending on how their duty station is qualified, how the hardship level is qualified, and you have to get out then, or that's the idea, go somewhere and relax, and but you also have to keep in mind that you need to set up your own routine, and you need to eat healthy, and not when it's stressful for you and hard to engage in, destructive behavior, like maybe drinking, if that's possible. In South Sudan it is. In Darfur, obviously, it's dry. or and for me, what I do, and for me, it's just, again, it's visits, but I always have my travel yoga mat with me. If I travel with my case officer, we do yoga sessions in the office. We close the door. We have in the office, wherever we are, yoga. I've been known to do it in front of my container, and in the evening hours. And that, and you're on compounds where also military staff walks around, and after working hours, everyone goes for a walk or run or jog, and then they come past where I'm standing on my head, they're just running past, and you just gotta do it, because it keeps you sane, and I think that's very important.
Yeah. So this is thank you so much for painting that picture, because I think it really gives much more detail and context to what it's like and where you are. And then in terms of a piece of work or something that you think, a story that you think might capture, sounds like you had one that you'd like to tell, if that's right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, there's several stories to tell, because I think the beauty of this work is, and all the time I get really, I think the American way is to say excited about it, but I really, I really get the vibes going when I love it when people come to you and they really feel stuck and they're sad or they're angry or upset or resentful, whatever you have. And you can work with them not only through the issue at hand and see, the options and how to resolve it, but also work with them on how to take a different perspective and see if they can release, part, if not all, of their anger, resentment, or hurt about it, and then take what they learned into their life, in a positive way. And also what I notice is that just to be there and to listen to people, to really be there and listen, is enormously important. And I think in many peace building activities or mediation, it's the listening that we do. And Darfur, it's listening to the different tribes. In South Sudan, you need to listen to the people. You need to listen what they need, what their intentions are, how they want to reach it. And then you need to talk together how you can do it. And that's so, each one involved can achieve what they would like to achieve in the best possible way without harming others or hurting others or treading upon their rights, obviously. And so in an organization, it's the same. And, I give you, for instance, it's an example that I have used a few times because it's such a good one to explain what the work of an ombudsman encompasses, right? So I came into the mission in South Sudan, and the national staff, a part of the national staff, were on strike. So that's quite of an issue.
What do you mean by the national staff, just for the listeners? What do you mean by that concept?
Okay, so if United Nations opens a peacekeeping mission somewhere, they will have international staff who are trained to set up a mission on the ground, and they bring in the material and equipments to do that. And they will also have often international professional staff, human rights officers, election officers, rule of law officers, civil affairs, political affairs, and, of course, then also all the support, so human resources, logistics and engineering and, you name it, which you all need to build the offices and to have the compounds or the camps, as you call them. But you need national staff, because you're there and you need to employ national staff and also look, of course, what the national staff locally, what kind of skills they had, their language capacities, etc., and employ them. So you always have national staff in any mission. And you have national support staff, you have national professional staff. So you also will find national human rights officer, national civil affairs officers, depending on the mandate of the mission. So national staff, or part of national staff, was on strike. And what had ignited this or caused this was a few things, but one of the really a few long ongoing issues that were never solved, but also there had been a physical fight between an international staff and a national staff member. And so the knee-jerk reaction of an organization is to, discipline both the staff members, to throw the rule book at them, to then issue a memo telling everyone that this kind of behavior is zero tolerance, not accepted, and this and that, and then, continue. But you're stuck with a physical fight that happened, a strike now that's going on, and there is a story going around in the mission. Namely, people are depressed. They came to me. They were depressed about that this incident had happened, that it had come so far. Yeah, it's obviously hard often to reconcile international staff with national staff. Different cultures, different work approaches. National staff, basically by default have gone or are going through conflict and war and armed conflict, and have lost family, have a lot of bereavement and grief to deal with, have post-traumatic stress disorders or worse. Have often a limited set of skills, because during the conflict, their education got, stopped, or they had to leave their schools or universities. So there is always a bit of a friction because of the huge difference. And then come the internationals, and they go home every so many weeks and get home leave, and the nationals, they don't get that because they're supposed to be from the country. It's a whole HR vision behind that. But for me as an ombudsman, it's important to look at what happened in that conflict between these two people, why it happened, but also what is within the organization happening that it culminated in this, and what happens in the organization now that this, physical conflict, became known to everyone.
And do you ask yourself the question, what's happening in the outer environment as well, the context, the region, the regional situation that's also affecting the organization, that's affecting, I don't know whether that you start weaving those threads or not, but.
Well, look, I'm an organizational ombudsman, so my first focus is the individuals and the organization, obviously, and that's also how I've explained my mandate. But at the same time, of course, the UN is inside an area where there is a conflict that has been conflict last decennia, generations long, and so everything counts into that, and I will refer to that later on. So my approach is then to look at the broader picture, the organizational picture, and I talked to different people about it, what it meant for them that this had happened. And so people were depressed about it, and they felt defeated. They felt like, we want to work here, we want to help this country, the newest country in the world, South Sudan, to build itself up, to strengthen itself. That's what we're here for. And, and this is just, that has happened is disturbing. It reflects very bad on us. It reflects very bad on us in the community. There's so many things not going well. And, we need to better take care of a lot of things. And so I started asking them, I said, what do you think needs to happen? To turn this around, to improve the atmosphere in the mission, to improve these relationships, working relationships in the mission, to improve, the motivation, the morale of the staff. And I had also talked with the head of mission, Hilda Johnson at the time, the SRSG, the secretary, the special representative of the Secretary General, the head of the mission. And she was very open for my ombudsman intervention. Said, Gabrielle, whatever you can do it, please, because she also saw the incident in a far broader context, clearly. And so I just gathered people who I already knew, and also I think this is sort of the business school kind of nose I've got for who are the movers, the shakers, who are the ones who change things for the better, who are the ones who, if they would be empowered, would be able to, bring good to this organization and bring, positive change. And so I remember that I got them all together, then it was part of the National Staff Association, the International Staff Union, if you like. There were people from different departments, from the United Nations volunteers, from HR, but also from the substantial, so from civil affairs, from human rights, from police, and you get them all together, and those people who want to really talk about this and want to contribute. And so they come up with many ideas that would improve it. So I dealt with them, these ideas, and then I fed them back to this group as well as to others. And there were about 14 things that need to be done, from training of managers and staff in conflict resolution at work, to also training for local staff outside of their workspace, to create more coherence among them, and to also do capacity building, up to we need to reach out to the community. We need to start community projects as this mission in South Sudan, up to, more ideas how communication within the mission should flow. So it was quite a laundry list. And that laundry list I communicated to the mission management, one person at a time. And why did I do it with the mission management? Is about sort of 6-7 mission management team people. And because so that everyone to the Ombudsman, it's confidential, it's not on the record, it's not an official meeting, they all could express their doubts or their questions, and some had quite a bit. And then I could work with them to release those doubts and see, for example, somebody said, yeah, but Gabrielle, we could do all this, but we don't have the people for it. I said, but I've asked them, and they all want to volunteer. But they tell you should give them the means to do it, and it actually means the space. Time they will create themselves. They live and work in the same compound. It won't eat away from their time. But they want not that if they take an initiative that somebody throws a rule book at them and diminish their efforts and take away their energy. They want to be able to do this because their intention is so and so. And of course, that's working within a bureaucracy. Bureaucracy can be very, to put it a bit harsh, devastating, to people, because it can really take the soul out of what people are doing. And the United Nations is unfortunately very much of a bureaucracy and not a very functional oftentimes either. And so a lot of people lose because of that, their zest, for their work. And so that's what we discussed, and it fell in very, fertile earth, all these suggestions, which weren't mine. I had just been the channel for this. And they've worked on them to implement them for 2 years. And I remember that the deputy, SRSG, the deputy head of mission once phoned me and said, Gabrielle, they said, we just finalized the one of the list, or the last one of the list, and that was 2 years later. Yeah. So
they really have taken it to heart, and they really are making progress with the things.
Yeah. They took it all on board. So, and I think that is just a very good example of how you can take a conflict between two people, into a real broader context, and can through that analyze what's actually going on in the organization, and can then also mobilize, the people and their skills and their, their volunteerism, if you like, or their motive. You can mobilize them to get things done together, but you need, of course, then support that. You need to support that and not disempower it. And I think at the time they really did a good job. And unfortunately, not long thereafter, or even less than 2 years thereafter, the violence started to erupt in South Sudan.
Right after we were there, I think it started to,
Yeah, so it's the end of 2013. So, but I think this is a very good example. And I also would like to give a smaller one, because as you said in the announcement, I'm also a mediator, and I'm certified mediator. As I pictured also the places where people work, you just must imagine that you are a logistics officer, or you are an engineer or an IT, person, and you are you want to work in peacekeeping, and and then you'll be sent to, let's say, Abyei, and you arrive there, and it's a whole day almost to get there from Entebbe, and you're in this container. You have shared showers and toilets, and there's only half a chicken a day to eat with one onion and a tomato. And there's nothing to do. You can't leave the compound because outside is too dangerous. This rainy season, and you have to have your Wellingtons on because the mud is almost knee high. And in your container, you have issues, infestation of rodents. And there's a lack of everything. And there's
electricity probably too.
Yeah, absolutely. Electricity, water can be rationed as well. Water is normally in all these compounds turned off for most of the day. The same with power. So it's sort of half kind of camping that you're doing. And indeed, like people in Central African Republic, a lot of them are working in tents and are living in tents out there, right? And that's how missions start up, and Central African Republic is still starting up. So, and you're there, and you get a conflict with your supervisor, and you after work you go to your little container, and you don't have television, and the internet is down, and you can't Skype with your spouse or your friends or whoever to talk about the issue. And so it goes around in your head. And before you know it, these people just writing an angry letter to Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. I mean, just to say something. Or they really see now their boss as the worst person on this earth and could, and don't see a way out anymore. So it gets out of proportion. Because you're in a situation that's out of proportion, right? So what's out there reflects on you. And I think, and that's what I also said earlier, I want to refer to, is that never underestimate the power on you of the conflict you're located in. So if you're, and I've noticed that when I worked in the Middle East and Palestinian conflict, the dynamics of the conflicts around you, they seep into the energy of your workplace, also as a peacekeeping mission. So if you've got tribal conflict going on around, mission in South Sudan or in Darfur, of course you have them within the mission as well. And tribes could then be either one department against the other, or nationalities of mission members, staff members against other nationalities of staff members, or, the Middle Eastern staff in conflict with the Northern African staff, or, the European staff in conflict with the Eastern European. Anything is possible, but it's a sort of, you gotta create an awareness if you want to work in these places. Or, like also when I was in Kosovo, at work there was also issue around religion. And there was also a big issue between the Christians and the Muslims in Kosovo. So you got to be aware of that. And me, when I listen to people come on the issue, I really need to know where they're located, what are the local, conflict issues, tribal issues, and unravel that for them as well. But things get out of proportion sitting there. And
what about the other? Go ahead. Well, let me just say what I want to ask you, because I don't want to mess up your thread. But so it's really clear the picture you're painting of how the external environment is coming into the internal environment. But it makes me wonder about, because you're trying to improve the internal environment, and then the question is, how are there ways that you see that then percolating out in the external environment? What are ways that the internal environment can then impact the external environment in positive ways? That's a big question, but
it's a big question. But for me, it boils down to what I said earlier and what is in my bio. If you can deal with your conflicts at work and work in a more harmonious workplace, you will be more effective in your work that you bring out in the world. Now, for some people, the work means bringing a product out of the world that needs to have a bigger market share than others. But in peacekeeping, it's you bring peace out in the world. And I shall never forget when the regional ombudsman got appointed in New York, Ban Ki-moon personally welcomed us at the time. Because he found it so important that there are now regional ombudsmen, that the ombudsman office that already then existed for about 7 years within the UN. Now, for the first time, got decentralized, and 7 regional offices were to be opened, and he saw the positive force behind that. And the biggest thing that he said that day when he welcomed us there, he said, if we bring peace out in the world, we cannot do that if we don't bring peace within our organization. So we need to deal with the conflicts inside our own house in an effective way in order to bring peace out there. And I think that's so true. And I honestly really believe in that. And you got to have a lot of awareness on that, that you, and I think in every profession, it's a bit like this, the children of the cobbler have rotten shoes, and the children of the nutritionist or the nutritionist herself eats French fries at McDonald's every night. No, you can't afford that when you work in peacekeeping. You can't afford to say, I'm a human rights officer and I help these people get their rights, and then be a bully to your staff or be a dreadful, colleague. There got to be awareness on that. And it's such a high pressure cooker peacekeeping environment, right? So you have a compound, you have movement restrictions, you have food restrictions, you have a lot of illnesses, you have not very good medical care available often, you have issues with water, with housing. People have been in parts where all their accommodation got flooded and people almost drowned, even with flash floods in South Sudan, and also in even in Darfur you can have flash floods. So there's all these things, and then you are without your family. You're normally miles away, countries away, continents away from your family, your social circle, your friends. Your structure is completely changed, because at home, the job you had, you get from home to work, you had your clubs, your social clubs, your sport club, whatever you did, your shopping on Saturday, your hairdresser always, and suddenly you're out there and none of that is there. And you have to make do with all these idiots from all over the world, or all these very, intelligent professionals that, but you got to make do. It's not all anymore the people from your own country, and it's not your own race and not your own religion anymore. And there's this huge differences that people suddenly have to deal with on the ground. And then your beneficiaries, the people from that country that I said before, either have survived war, are surviving war, and have to deal with all the ramifications of that, which me, having grown up in a peaceful country, cannot even start to imagine what that implies.
And I remember, when we were working in the piece of work that you and I did together, I remember the South Sudanese national staff that were there, and the tremendous maturity and humility they were bringing into the room. I remember being so moved by that, given that so many of them had been through probably just unspeakable, or had seen unspeakable things, and yet somehow they were able to show up with just tremendous capacity, really. That being,
and that's. Let me finish that one example about then somebody sitting in this container and has a conflict with the boss, and it gets no one to talk to, and then they might phone me. So this person phoned me, and they talked about it and dealt with the emotions and also put it into a perspective and through the options, as I said. So what can you do? And and they always want first that the ombudsman uses the magic wand and sort of does it all for them.
Rules in their favor. Right.
Everyone wants to be right in a conflict too, and so, but it's about, empowering the other person, even through telephone, how to deal with him or herself. And we can put up a role play over the phone. We can talk it through. And also, I then, as a mediator, talked to the supervisor, and to get better understanding what the supervisor's issues were about, the staff member and this and that. So you do some shuttle diplomacy and then some mediation, and then finally set them both up to talk. You never meet them. You set them both up to talk together out there in that jungle, and have to leave it to them to create that moment and to deal with it and manage it. And then we got a few days later, we got a phone call from the same staff member who had his problems with his boss and said, well, I've sorted this out with the boss. And we ended up having a beer in the bar in the, of the mission. Yeah. And beautiful. That makes me so happy, It is so important. And there's so many of these beautiful examples. I had once a staff member, he came to me and he was about to be retired, and he said he had gone through organizational change and there was a restructure of the department he worked in and this and that. And he said, look, the management is not listening to me. And I've written these emails, given all this advice, but they're just not listening, and they should, because I know all these things and this and this and that. I said, right, so he said, show me what you've written. And he showed it to me. I said, if you ever get an email like this, will you be willing to accept what is, And he said, I said, because you basically slapped them around the ears, that they're stupid and incompetent. I said, if you say that, do you really think, if you want to sell an idea, because that's basically what you're doing, do you really think that this is going to help? That this is going to do the trick for you? You just punch them on the nose and then said, do as I say. He said, right, no, it's not the way. Anyway, we talked about also his role. He was African. He was going back to his country and to his village. And he wanted to really become now in the role of the elder of the village. I said, same thing there. I said, you can't come home and sort of tell everyone the right act and, tell them how to do it. You need to create rapport and relationships with people back home, to be respected, and then find an opening with them. So you can become their elder and their mentor and their coach, and the wise guy who's been out there and comes back, or the wise woman, and he took that. He saw the parallel. So and the immense relief of a person coming. This was person to person. So he came to my office with this strained face and these angry eyes and this attitude, and then the release and the relief and the opening he saw for himself, and also how he saw his next role, after his retirement, which is coming up in a few months. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And he was very, very grateful for this. Also later on told me that he changed the tune and that people started to listen at work, and that he felt complete when he left for retirement. And so it's these kind of things, isn't it? Because we not only harm others when we have a conflict, but we harm ourselves as well, right? And I know it all from experience. I have been not very well at dealing with conflict, in the first decennia, probably 10, 50 years of my work, and still at times I forget how to do it well. But so I wish that there was an ombudsman, in my days, when I had issues at work, and I had not written an angry email, but rather understood how to work on this interrelational, more effective way, and create peace and harmony at work through my approach as well. And with that also more in myself, and I always say, people who write emails, great idea, write them and say everything you want in them, but put them in the draft box. Never send them, write but never send. And then read again, and then once you're done with it, you can delete or whatever, but never send it, because you need to keep an eye on what you want. So as an ombudsman, we also talk often about, but what is it that you want? And a lot of people haven't thought about that. Because as you said earlier, Susan, it's about being right. And the other one is so nasty to me and so dreadful, and or they're so stupid, and how could they have done this? Right, but what outcome would you like to see from here? That's a different story. And what can you contribute to this, and what could be your role in this? And and the same questions you ask managers. We say, I've got problems with my staff, or my team is dysfunctional. It's what we both worked on. Yeah, but what would you like to see happen? And how would you be able to get there? What is necessary, and what could you contribute? And are you aware that if you, if you do this and that might be the outcome of it? So could you do it in a different way, for example? Yeah, so
really beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful shifting from blame, from sort of a culture of blame to a culture of responsibility and accountability and reflection.
And reflection, I think, is very much a key word in there. Yeah, but now I've been talking for quite a bit. So.
Well, and we need to end, and this is so super interesting. There's so many anecdotes and pictures that I think the listeners will have in their minds from listening to you, and wisdom. And I don't know if as we close, if there's any remaining thoughts or words of wisdom or anything for people who are listening that you want to say that I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything, anyone who wants to do this kind of work or anything that stands out to you in terms of your learnings as you go forward, or I know I'm giving you too many things to think about, or what's most exciting to you now? However you want it. Maybe if we take like 2 more minutes to close, because we're pushing the clock. But
so I think for anyone, no matter what job you have, we normally don't get taught at school or university or wherever, how to deal with conflict, and conflict is an everyday thing. And so if we train ourselves into this and do a course, whether it's nonviolent communication or conflict resolution or whatever, it will always be extremely helpful. And I think for managers it's a must. For managers it is a must. And I do believe that organizations like the UN will go towards looking for these kind of skills in their managers and will insist that people know. And I think the other if you want to do this work, you need to like helping people. Obviously, you need to be empathetic, and be non-judgmental with whatever they come. And I think what's very critical for an ombudsman is that they also understand the organizational dynamic and really can make that link, because that just increases your impact tenfold, right? And what I get thrilled about, I'm thrilled about my next move. I had wonderful 6 years experience in peacekeeping. Through the word was key. Self-reflection is important, and I learned a lot from that. I felt I grew a lot. I have gained a lot myself out of this of a person. And so now I'm ready to become the ombudsman for WFP and love humanitarian,
which is the World Food Program.
The World Food Program, and I love humanitarian organizations. And they work in 80 different countries around the world, so on all continents. And I'll be I'm very proud, but also happy to be able to start work there and continue with this work within organizations. Yeah.
So, Gabrielle, I'm going to put your bio will be up on the website, and as will how to contact you. If I'm assuming it's okay if people want to respond to this in any way and contact you. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I'd be very interested to hear people's reactions and responses, or if there's any questions. Or sure. Yeah.
Okay. So listen, I thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a super interesting conversation and interview, and probably has been so useful to so many people listening to just on the ground experience with what this has looked like for you. This version of being in a peacekeeping mission, not necessarily building, peacekeeping, ombudsing, all these different related terms. But thank you so much. And it'll be really interesting. I hope sometime you'll come back on the show again and add some more of your incredible wisdom and experience to what we're trying to do here. So thank you so much. Well,
really, it's been my pleasure. And I also feel really honored that you wanted to include me. And good luck with it, because there's a lot of interesting experience that you're collecting on this topic, and I think that's really a great thing to do. So thanks for that too, Susan, and I hope to work with you soon again as well.
I hope so too, Gabrielle. All right,
all the best.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Peace Building Podcast. Check out thepeacebuildingpodcast.com for show notes and for more great information and resources. We'd like your feedback, comments, and suggestions. Please email them to susan@thepeacebuildingpodcast.com. And come join us again for next week's episode for more great thinking, innovations, and ideas to take our planet to the next level.